today we'll be reacting to are direwolves going to become overpowered again by Tierzu. And if you don't know, they brought back an extinct animal, or scientists brought back an extinct animal. And I'm genuinely confused because who is funding this? Why are they bringing back extinct animals? Have they not seen Jurassic Park? I haven't, but I know what happens. But I can pretty much guess what happens when you start playing with nature. And I'm realizing scientists just do a whole bunch of nonsense and get paid for it. So, with that being said, all right, let's see if they're gonna be OP.
It's all over the news. Outside's modding community has successfully managed to mod the direwolf back into the game as a playable character again. While obviously this announcement generated a ton of discourse around the scientific and ethical implications of resurrecting extinct characters from previous balance patches, what I want to discuss is the potential impact this could have on the competitive metagame. Just how...
Wait a second, are they gonna be releasing them? Because isn't that like a whole thing where it's gonna ruin the ecosystem? That's a, if I remember anything from science class. What they do? They can't. You can't do that with plants because it'll ruin the whole ecosystem. Because if you bring out one species that hasn't been around in a while, their food that they used to eat back in the day isn't there anymore. So now they're gonna be hunting the bigger animals that are already less in numbers than the smaller animals, and then a whole bunch of stuff's gonna happen.
overpowered was the dire wolf back during the Ice Age, and where are they most likely to place on the tier list in the current meta? First, let's discuss the direwolf's base stats. The easiest way to do this is to compare them to the Grey Wolf. So the most obvious difference is their size, as they were on average a solid 40% larger than the Grey Wolf, which gave them a much higher HP stack. This allowed them to tank hits that would potentially one-shot a modern wolf, a necessity given how powerful their hunting targets were. Their power stat was also significantly higher, even greater than you'd expect based on their increased size alone. Their broader, heavier skulls granted them a dramatically stronger bite force, enough to easily crack a bone. This is where the direwolf's stat superiority ends, though.
Why are we bringing them back? For what? Oh my god, bro. They're just bored. Yeah. People with cancer, things like that, and you're just bringing back extinct animals. All right.
The direwolf had a lower intelligence stat than modern wolves, on account of
that
a slightly lower brain-to-body mass ratio. Not so low as to preclude them from using pack hunting tactics, but definitely low enough that their ability to sense danger and avoid obvious traps apparently wasn't as sharp. Their legs were thicker and comparatively shorter, making them a bit less nimble and far less capable of distance running than the modern Grey Wolf. For stealth, the direwolf's bright white coat gave it a massive stealth bonus on snowy terrain, but was otherwise a bit worse than the versatile camouflage of the greys and browns of the modern wolf. Their perception abilities were more or less comparable, and the same goes for the defense stat, as both relied on their thick fur as a form of light armor. As alluded to before, for direwolves, the metagame during the Ice Age was basically constant boss rush mode. Each hunt would center around trying to bring down one of the Ice Age's many behemoths, something like a bison or a giant ground sloth. Their stat spread was excellent for this type of game plan. Their high damage, blood loss inflicting bites, and pack hunting tactics were a devastating counter to the high HP herbivores of the time.
That's a random. That's a random question.
Their lower mobility was less of an issue than you might expect.
How come animals didn't like adapt to being hunted?
Hunting targets weren't going to run away anyway. That said, even with their boost,
how come some animals didn't adapt to being jumped? You feel what I'm saying? Like, how come like gazelle and all that don't have like hands to, like, you know what I'm saying, deflect all? Because usually they're the ones getting jumped, so you would assume they would have tactics to, you know what I'm saying, be less jumpable instead of just being faster. That makes sense. I don't know.
boosted HP compared to Grey Wolves, engaging Pleistocene megafauna head-on was extremely risky, and could very easily have resulted in getting sent back to your respawn point if you got careless. But the larger issue was the direwolf's matchups versus the other apex predators of the Ice Age. After securing a kill, characters like the short-faced bear and Smilodon would often bully them away from the meat, and could easily delete their entire HP bar if they tried to fight back. Because of this poor matchup spread, direwolves were often forced to eat as quickly as possible, or to wait for the more dangerous players to finish looting before getting to reap the rewards of their own successful hunts. In this scenario, they're
That's actually crazy. Bro, that's crazy that animals just know. How do they know when another animal, like, is about to run down on something? Like, how do do they just follow, and the wolves just don't seem to hear or smell the other animal following them to get their prey? You feel what I'm saying? They don't have like juking tactics to where it's like, you know what I'm saying? They would walk one way, walk back, and then try to confuse the footsteps and stuff. I don't know.
incredible bite force had the bonus effect of letting them get more value out of a carcass than other predators could. As even after bears and saber-tooths were finished with it, there would still be plenty of bone marrow available for the wolves. In this regard, the direwolf has a lot in common with the spotted hyena, being a powerful hunter that can also pivot to a scavenging playstyle whenever necessary. However, even though they have similarly powerful bone-crushing bites, only the hyena spec'd into the specialized durable molars for crunching on bone. Direwolves have much less specialized teeth, made more for just general meat shearing and inflicting bleed damage. Even with their higher bite force, over-reliance on bone crunching resulted in direwolves burning through the durability of their primary weapon, dulling its effectiveness in future combat scenarios. This was a massive long-term liability, and as a consequence, the direwolf unfortunately had a very low lifespan compared to the grey wolf. But obviously the meta has shifted a lot since the Ice Age. So what would the direwolf's matchup spread look like now? Well, the biggest change between then and now is the lack of megafauna. Gigantism is simply not seen as being necessary in the game's competitive landscape anymore, and so tailoring your character specifically to counter that type of build just isn't that potent of an advantage now. In fact, I would guess that they're...
So, now, since there's no, like, big animals, right? They get released into the wild. Boom. Over the years, would they evolve to look like regular wolves now? Or would the meta change for them, or would they change for the meta? Because I'm thinking like if what he's saying are true and they're bigger wolves and whatnot, wouldn't they just like shrink to the size of regular wolves and lose their bone crushing ability? You feel what I'm saying? Would their crunch turn into a bite for my Pokemon fans?
Lower agility would offset any power advantage direwolves would bring to the table. Most of the current meta's key herbivores, like deer, rely solely on speed and perception to survive, and would be very difficult for a slower, bulkier wolf to catch. But with that said, direwolves would have a much easier time protecting any quarry they did manage to bring down. While grizzly bears would of course remain a threat, the matchup is nowhere near as much of a blowout as the short-faced bear was versus direwolves. In fact, even a pack of grey wolves can sometimes hold their own versus brown bears. And the direwolf's main adversary, the saber-tooth, has no modern analog in the North America server. Large cats are essentially a non-factor, while mid-sized...
So what server are we putting them in? Are we going to send them to Africa? Are you putting them in? Like, where are you going to send? What server are you going to put these direwolves in? Because it just seems like they just would be overpowered, and that makes sense. They would, since they'll be like stronger than all like the lions and tigers of the world. Would they just be the new big dogs? Or, again, would they just die off faster if they can't evolve fast enough to where they can, they can start hunting the faster animals? Man, I'm really thinking. Man, they didn't think this through, huh?
Cats like the puma would be obliterated 1v1. However, the last matchup they need to worry about is a lot more interesting. What would the matchup be like between the direwolf and the grey wolf? On its surface, it might seem like an obvious blowout. Direwolves are more powerful and can take more damage. And sure, in 1v1 combat, I don't think there'd be any doubt which character comes out ahead. But in terms of survival, the equation shifts dramatically. Direwolves were already struggling during the Ice Age. They were a popular pick for sure, but for many of the reasons already discussed, they were no top tier. Their core strategy only works well in a server filled with slow, giant targets. Grey wolves, on the other hand, have much more flexibility in their diet. When the opportunity arises for a pack to come together and bring down a large beast, grey wolves of course can and do rise to the occasion. But, because of their smaller stature, they can subsist on smaller prey when necessary. Builds like the rabbit, beaver, and even fish can fill the gaps if there's ever a lack of large prey on the server.
But direwolves need that real food. They can't go on a vegan or pescatarian diet, I feel
to reliably catch agile sprinters like rabbits, would not be able to thrive off of that diet. There's a reason that most other large predators function at least partially as generalist.
Okay, but another question, right? Damn, I forgot. Do you think the direwolves will learn how to be better trappers in the sense of they would be able to work together to trap like smaller prey? Because from what I'm understanding, they are slower and don't have that much endurance compared to regular wolves. So would they become trappers, or again, would they go extinct again because they're not built for this server? And also, could they take down an elephant or a rhino? Because I'm assuming like back in like when the dire wolves were alive, they were out here attacking stronger animals with stronger exteriors. So wouldn't that mean they can just? I'm not sure who was stronger, a mammoth or a regular elephant. But if they were hunting mammoth is mammoth, whatever mammoth, will they be able to just easily take down an elephant 1v1?
Omnivores, with a broad skill set that can make use of a wide variety of food sources. Lastly, there's one final major difference between the Ice Age meta and the modern meta, and that is the centralization around the human build. The Grey Wolf is the literal best example in the game of a character that turned the threat of the new top tier into an opportunity, becoming the human's first choice for party member and hunting teammate. This is primarily due to the wolf's intelligence, exemplified by its ability to cooperate. Cooperate with its wolf teammates, cooperate with ravens asking for help chasing away rivals from carcasses, and of course cooperate with humans looking for help guarding their camps and chasing down prey. Direwolves were less cooperative, even with each other. With direwolves being both less intelligent and requiring more food to survive, it's unlikely they'd have ever been able to slot into a human's party. So ultimately, I do believe the wolves already established in the meta will be able to hold their ground against these fearsome Ice Age predators. After all, they did it once before. Grey wolves were added to the game around the start of the Ice Age, and survived through the entire glaciation period and into modern day. There's little reason to expect these resurrected direwolves would fare any better than the tried and true Grey wolf now. Or is there? The fundamental assumption we've been making for this whole video is that these newly modded characters are in fact authentic direwolves. But how exactly did this group of data miners and modders go about reversing the removal of direwolves from the character select screen? You could be forgiven for assuming they simply got their hands on a former direwolf player's old save data, and just copy-pasted the entire thing onto a fresh save file. If they'd done that, I would completely agree that they had indeed re-added the direwolf full stop. But no, if you take a look at the modders' dev blog, it appears their actual methodology was to take the Grey Wolf's game data and edit it to buff the Grey Wolf in a few specific areas to make it
so not a direwolf. And bro, call it something new. Don't call it something old because my genuine question is, how are you matching the stats from back then that were made through evolution and specifically made for that time to now taking something millions of years removed and now trying to take the DNA somehow and reverse it back to that exact time, because there are millions of years between a wolf now and a wolf back then, even if we're calling it all a gray wolf. Mm.
Similar in size and power to the original direwolf. Now, whether or not this counts as a true direwolf is kind of up to your own interpretation. If you modded a horse to give it a horn, did you make a rhino? If you modded a beluga whale to give it a tusk, did you make a narwhal? I could kind of...
But how are they just modding animals? How did that even make sense? Do you need to? Huh? How are you just modding DNA? Why? Why can't you just? Why can we just do that? You feel me? Why don't you do that with like, aren't pugs the one that can barely breathe? Why not change them up? You know what I'm saying? Can they give people superpowers? Can you give an animal superpowers? Can you make? Hmm.
kind of see both sides of the argument here, but what I think is more important for our discussion is that these modders don't seem to have programmed in any of the direwolf's former limitations. They buffed the wolf's size and strength, sure. They even gave it a stark white coat, giving it a huge stealth bonus on snowy terrain, similar to the polar bear. But as far as I can tell, they did not nerf its mobility by giving it proportionally shorter legs, nor did they nerf the wolf's intelligence by giving it a proportionally smaller cranial cavity. And this is where I do think there's a genuine risk of these modded characters becoming broken, either in the overpowered sense or legitimately unplayable sense. They could be extremely overpowered, possessing all the advantages.
But the thing is, they were made in a lab, so are because I'm genuinely trying to figure this out. So they're made in a lab, not born in the wild. They learn how to hunt. So either they're going to become pets, or just get tossed in the wild, or they're going to be trained to learn how to survive in the wild. Mm.
Advantages of the dire wolf with zero trade-offs. But it's also possible that this modded build is so overtuned that its energy upkeep costs will be completely unmanageable. Brain size in particular is one of those traits that can easily sink a build if the payoff doesn't materialize, as brain size is one of the most calorically demanding traits in the game. The original direwolf player base already ran into this roadblock at the end of the Ice Age, and this was without the increased energy needs of a larger brain. At the end of the Ice Age, the devs patched the game precisely to punish greedy, overtuned builds like this, and it was the compact efficiency of the gray wolf, coyote, and other small carnivores that kept them in the game while the direwolf faced extinction. We may never know which of these extremes ends up being true, as the modders have so far maintained that these superwolves will only be playable on their private server, where presumably their massive energy demands will be met regardless of their viability. Anyway, there's still way too much we don't know about these modded superwolves for me to say for sure whether or not I think they're actually going to be overpowered. Even that bit about their increased brain size is heavily speculative. I don't actually know if the code they edited actually results in increased brain size. From what I can tell, it's at least indirectly tied to brain size, but without directly measuring these superwolves' brain sizes and metabolisms, it's impossible to say for sure. If you or anyone you know is a part of this modding community, I'd love to get in touch. They've been hinting at the possibility of doing something similar for the mammoth.
Why?
So I'll try to keep you all updated on the latest modding shenanigans. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks again for watching, and as always, good luck.
So at the end of the video, all I have to say is, for a while, they're trying to bring back old animals. For what? Is there like a scientific reason? Or you're trying to bring back, I don't know, Michael Jackson or somebody? Like, what is the end goal of bringing back old animals and putting them back in the wild? You feel me? Like, if you bring back a T-Rex, like, okay, first of all, if they were to bring back a T-Rex, would they just whatchamacallit, just get like a crocodile and uh evolve, or de-evolve it to a T-Rex. No, I don't know. I don't know. Like, comment, subscribe, and don't get eaten by a direwolf, I guess.